नहीं कर रहे हैं साले, करना नहीं रहे हो तो पैसे लूंगा मैं उनका भी।
Hello everyone, I'm Kapil Mahani, leading the indirect tax practice of India. And today we have gathered to discuss the aspect of one of the typical issue of inspection, search and seizure, including discussing the aspects of arrest under GST. Warm welcome to everyone, and thanks to CA Club India for hosting such webinars for the professionals. So, talking just a little bit about me, I am practicing in GST and indirect tax area in GST and customs, and leading the indirect tax practice for the firm. Before, from the last 3 years with this firm, and earlier I was with Ernst & Young practice, doing indirect tax for the country as well as including the litigations. So that's about me in short, and let's start the session. So today, the objective of this webcast was more to discuss the aspects of practical challenges, as well as to understand the professional that what exactly how this proceedings goes and what all things they need to do, start from the inspection of the officer and till the time that matter gets adjudicated. So we'll discuss everything in detail, the journey of the search proceedings, whether the professionals can come up, can be person during that search operations, what is Panchnama, whether the officer can actually seize the goods, what all powers which are having with the assessee, what all powers which are having with the consultant to represent, when an officer can actually arrest any person, if what is the quantum of evasion if arrest can be done, and what if the provisions are wherein the arrest cannot be done. So all the things we'll be discussing in detail, and so we have a short 1 hour time. So this, although this matters requires a considerable time, but we have tried to gather more of question answer form so that we can give you the more of practical aspects, and we have gathered our experience into one document. Starting with so this is the first slide is more from the aspects of how this journey of inspection moves around. So what happens typically, if you have seen in the last 3 years since the time the GST has come. So what the officers, so there is a department which is called a DGI department, which has the power. So Director General of Intelligence. So in the department, what this department has the power, they have all the informations. They are collating all the information from the data analytics, and from that information they generally go to any assessee based on. So let's suppose hota kaise hai, I'll give you an example. So let's suppose there is an assessee, and that assessee has issued any invoice to another party, and without actually giving the goods or the services, and that document, what they have done is that they have done a paper trail to pass on the credit rather than actually giving the goods or services. So this is a kind of a chain concept which generally starts, wherein we have seen this concept is called a circular trading. So what happens is when the officer sees that there is exactly the chain which is happening, then they understand all these chain concepts, and they first of all, either they start from the downgrade or they start from the upgrade. Upgrade means who is the mastermind or who is the person who is actually receiving. It happens sometimes that there is someone, either your client or someone, a business associate, have taken one bill or two bill in such kind of a cases. However, the master person got connected and they got into the from the GST authorities and intelligence team made a search and seizure operations at their premises. So they got all the invoices which they have issued to the party. So what they do is they go to even to the mastermind person as well as to the down person who has actually taken even a one invoice. So that's why we always say to our clients as well as to entire industry or the professionals that these are the concepts. In these things, do not involve into such level of activities, even for one single transaction, because that you are exposing your case towards the authorities to come, even if you are not doing any other activity which is malified or anything. But this one transaction can expose you or expose your books of accounts, and then you can come up in a very trouble situation. So how this proceeding starts is the taxpayer involves in certain transactions which we have discussed, on which officer have a reason to believe that tax has been evaded. Then the proper officer, they generally have they get the powers from, and we'll discuss that what are the powers they have, and they start the proceedings when in respect of they have a reason to believe, and there are certain reasons to believe which are being given, and they take the power from the JC and start the inspection proceedings. So there are difference. So what is that? I'm talking first of the inspection. So that's how the proceeding starts it. The person, they have a reason to believe that this person has evaded any tax, then they start the search, the inspection proceedings. Once they start the inspection, they go on to that premises. The second step is if they see that there are certain activities or there are certain goods or there are certain transactions which are actually required and which requires that a seizure, then that inspection proceedings get converted into a search and seizure of the proceedings. So in that search and seizure, they not only go to only the premises wherein the place of business are being operated, they can go to any of the premises wherever they have a reason to believe that any possible tax evasion of or any possible goods which are kept which are unrecorded by the assessee. The third step is after once they do this, after conducting the search, they gives a panchnama of what all things, even with the INC, what all things they are seizing and what all goods. We'll even discuss that in detail, that kaun se goods they can collect, whether they can seize those goods which are as per the law, everything is available, or they can seize those goods in order to collect the revenue from the assessee. So we'll discuss that what are the powers of the assessee, what all things they can seize and what they cannot seize. That is again a very important aspect which we will discuss in detail. After retaining all the things, then they seize the goods and they give a panchnama. Where that panchnama is a document, and it is as per the legal evidence that this panchnama becomes a document, whatever they have seized and the entire proceedings which happened at the premises. Once they give the panchnama, and then the proceeding starts off someone, they calling of the team as well as the tax team as well as any officer in regard to that search, and that search then the officer generally, this is one of the practical aspects, is that they generally force the assessee to pay the tax and close the matter, because they say that if you will close, then we'll not probe or you will not go into the further details. which might, if we'll go, if you will not give us or if you will not cooperate with us. So this is the one time wherein the officer will even ask you, even you are genuine or you have a do not have, and you have only one or two any such transaction wherein then they can ask you to pay the taxes without even adjudicating, without even anything, and pay the tax and close the matter. That is one stage. Herein we'll discuss that what all challans you need to use, what all aspects you need to use in terms of replying to the authorities, that, and if you are not satisfied that their demands, then even if they are forcing you to pay the tax, then whether under protest can be paid, because officers always say that there is no concept of under protest under the GST. We'll discuss whether we can pay under protest or not. And the last and the second last stage is the issuance of the show cause notice. If everything happens, they finally issue a show cause notice on activities they have, why the demand should not be which should not be levied, including interest and penalty on such basis. And lastly, once the show cause notice is being issued, then the matters becomes a show cause notice requires adjudication at first level before the commissioner, and then this all proceeding starts it. So till this time, till the adjudication, there is no concept wherein any tax is required to be paid. It is only once the order, which comes even after the adjudication of show cause notice, then only the tax is required to be paid if you are a bona fide assessee. So here we have discussed in this slide that where a joint commissioner, so generally the professionals ask is that what are the possible reason to believe wherein they can come up and they can inspect the place of business. I am again referring to the concept of place of business because that is a very important. They can only inspect. So if they have a power to inspect, then they can only go to the places of business rather than any place wherein the business, the assessee is not registered. So the JC or the officer, they authorize the investigation officer, which is a DGI department, which we have discussed. If there is any suppression of any tax, any transaction of supply, or if you have claimed any excess input tax credit, or if you have suppressed any stock of goods, or you have contravened any provisions under the Act, then in that scenario, they can come to you and inspect. And in some of the cases we have seen wherein the company have actually genuinely purchased, but the e-way bill was not there. They missed to generate the e-way bill. In that scenario also, they can even see one of your transaction, a genuine transaction, as a malified transaction. And because it is one of the contravention of law which you have done. And he can authorize in writing INC 01 or any of the officer to inspect places of business of the taxable person. So this is something more of theoretical, and even you need to understand that what are the reason to believe. We'll discuss whether the reason to believe are required to be given to the assessee, or they can be asked, the assessee can ask from the person, or it is bound by the authorities are bound to disclose such information to the assessee. We'll discuss. So the next is, once we said that inspection proceeding starts, and if the inspection officer, they have a reason to believe that there is certain malified documents or goods or anything which are required to be seized, then they convert the inspection proceedings to a search and seizure proceeding. So my humble submission here is that everything which the professionals, when they are dealing such level of cases, or their clients come to them, whenever any officer comes to do such level of inspection, it is my advice that you should try to give a maximum cooperation to the authorities by way of giving the documents in terms of any, or rather than giving showing the documents, and so that so we need to justify to the authority that there is no malified intention with the assessee. And there might be, we have seen certain level of cases, and we have that wherein we have not even made that inspection into a search. So in simple words, आप inspection तक ही रोक सकते हैं, and you can convince the officer by a documentation on merits that there is nothing malified which is there. So do not convert this inspection into a search and seizure, because once the search and seizure starts, then in that scenario the matter goes to a different level of proceedings, and then the department will have a different level of powers. They have a different level of procedures to deal in such scenario. So the first stage wherein you can close the inspection and without even converting into search is this level. And in the search, we have already discussed, if they start the search proceedings, then they can even go to any premises wherein they have a reason to believe that any malified goods or anything which is not in contravention of law has been kept in relation to that assessee. So this is very important. Then the powers go beyond that level of inspection. Now, we have already discussed that. Now it is more, we have the first question we have covered here is, what are the reasons, what are the probable reasons that for an inspection, and what are the reasons to believe practically. So this is more from the point of view of practical, that wherein you have actually availed a fraudulent ITC. So in a circular trading concept, what generally happens is that some A party which actually is supplying goods to a customer who has a retail customer, and the customer has actually bought the goods, but that goods, against that the customer has not taken the invoice. So it is like कि आप shopping करने गए और आपने अपना कपड़ा खरीदा और अपने कपड़े के against में आपने कोई invoice नहीं लिया. So once you have not taken that invoice, in such scenario what happens is, the person who is supplying the goods to a genuine recipient customer, they have the stock in records because they have not issued the invoice. So what happens is, they generally give such level of invoice to a party who actually needs of invoice rather than the goods. So then this level of circular trading starts. So now what is the DGGI? What is the basic difference from the pre-GST to the GST regime? Earlier, this concept and there were fraudulent activities which were happening specifically in the VAT regime, but this was not being caught up by the officers on account because that was a state level issue, and one state was not cooperating with another state to share the data. So what happens is, in that scenario, they were not having an information of a pan-India information. Now the DGI authorities have a pan-India information. There the tracking is from not only from the invoice, but also from the e-way bill. Then they do such level of inspection of various places wherein they see that business premises are not being operated, and there is so much of credit which are being passed on from such business, and then they issue such level of things. And to whosoever party they have issued the invoice, they go to that party and try to see that whether actually the genuine purchase were happened or not, by looking out the document, by looking out the transport copy, by looking out the e-way bill. And even they go beyond that. In an e-way bill, they will check that the truck number or the lorry number which is happening is actually lorry which is existing. There is a e-Vahan website, they check on that. So these are the practical things to see whether the documentation are correct at that point. And if even one single transaction they see that this level of malified is there, then they see as a malified activity and start into this search and seizure proceeding. The second aspect is mostly in terms of the circular trading, and that is why I like to apprise all the audience here, is that this matter is very critical of the search and seizure. And you have seen, must have seen in the past, that there are so many arrests which are happening because in this GST regime, the powers of the GST officers are so much of wide, then they can even arrest under section 69, wherein they are in a view that any malified or any circular trading has happened. And even before concluding, and this matter of arrest is being pending before a Supreme Court 3-member bench, wherein the matter is with whether before adjudication, before anything which is being concluded, decided, any person or any officer can arrest a person on a reason to believe. That is one of the particular issue which is pending before the Supreme Court bench. Now we have second aspect which we have discussed here is the importance of DIN under search and seizure. So what is the practical? This is the first step. So if any person is coming to your premises and saying that we want to inspect your premises, which generally happens in majority of the case, it starts with the inspection. So you need to check, because this UDN has been, so you need to check whether the DIN number is available on that document or not. And if that is not available, then the officer cannot initiate the proceedings, and that has to be on record to initiate any proceeding of inspection or search and any other aspect. So this is one aspect which professionals have to understand, that they need to have such level of information when any officer is asking to inspect or search any premises. The next question which we have discussed is, are we have the powers, or do we have the powers, I can say, wherein we can ask from the JC or an officer that what are the reason to believe why you have come to our premises, what are the grounds? Because this is one of the basic questions which always a assessee or a consultant or a professional always ask from the department, and you should know that the officer are not bound to give you the details that what are the reason to believe, and that is being widely discussed, and it is a settled position that they are not about to disclose any such information, because reason to believe is not being here. It is being copied even from the income tax, and there are so many judicial pronouncements in a sense wherein it has been negatively held that the reason to believe cannot be disclosed to the assessee. So that is one aspect which we wanted to highlight to the audience. The second aspect is, what are the questions? So once the officer comes to your premises or to your client premises, now what are the questions they can ask, and what all aspects you need to see very carefully while replying? Because I have said in the starting that it is very important, and what is the consultant role into this? Your role by reaching to that premises or any of your team member, that you need to see that inspection should be done in a very diligent manner, so that everything documentation, so that you can make the officer believe that there is no malevolent intention or there is nothing which the assessee is doing. It is only, say, if someone has done a fraud, that does not result or does not mean that we have done a default on account of it. So you need to have a proper documentation for everything in records. And here I just want to highlight that nowadays, since 1819 audit is going on, so you need to make sure that while doing your GST audits, you need to make sure that the e-waybill reconciliation of purchases as well as sales are being done and are reconciled with your returns, because it is very important that e-waybills which are being available to you are reconciled, because these documents are required even at the time of the assessment. Even the assessment will be done after 3 years or 4 years. That's something is of an issue of the department. So what are the general questions? The first question, if they have a reason to believe, is copy of the invoices. If they have a reason to believe on certain parties, so what they generally do is they ask you n number of parties, among that they also impose. So let's suppose a party is ABC, who actually has done a wrongful act of issuing you the invoice and based on which the credit was taken. So they will not ask you only the ABC invoice. They can ask you even the 4 invoices of XYZ, TWC, anything of other party, including this party. And then they will see every documentation. Then they will see what is the process of purchase, whether that process is being followed in your case or not, whether the process is consistent for all the purchases or not, whether that process, in case you have purchased, in this case specifically from your vehicle, but otherwise you purchase from the vehicle of the vendor. So why that has been done? What are the approval process of payment? Who all persons were involved in procuring goods from such parties? All these questions can be asked, including any other question which they require, either in relation to this transaction or to any other aspect, because now they have entire power to even go, not restricting themselves to that transaction, even going beyond that transaction. So the next question which we are covering here is, can the officer ask the question beyond the reason to believe? If he's having a doubt on transaction with XYZ, can he inquire about ABC as well, knowing ABC was not a party for reason to believe? So here my reply to everyone is, they can ask you n number of questions, either related to reason to believe, either not related to reason to believe. That has nothing to do with respect of inspection or search operations. Now, this is one of the very important document in any of the search or inspection proceedings. Specifically, this document is what is a panchanama, because once they conclude their inspection and search proceedings, what they give you is the document which is called a panchanama. And what is a panchanama? What all details are being mentioned in that panchanama? what all aspects you need to see what has been recorded in Panchnama, and whether that Panchnama, whatever you have made recorded in that Panchnama, can be produced before the court as an evidence against yours. So that is one thing which we need to see, that Panchnama is a document wherein certain things will occur in the presence of Panchis. So once the matter concludes, so they come up with certain level of witness which they have, and that witness will sign on that Panchnama, that how that proceedings started, how that proceedings concluded, what all documents they have taken on record, seized, I'll say seized, and what all documents are, or apart from document goods they have seized. Everything will be recorded in that Panchnama, so that it becomes a document for the further proceedings adjudication. That so, now, what is the legal resource available? So let's suppose in the proceedings, their goods are being seized. Now the aspect which is very important is what goods they can seize, whether they can seize goods even which are having proper documents, everything is records on in their books of accounts, as well as they have the copy of invoices, or they can seize only those goods which are unrecorded, undocumented, and which are malafidely without even taken on record. So the reply to here is that they can only seize such goods which are being not recorded, or which are not being which has been malafidely purchased with the intention to sell it without records. That is one thing which I want to apprise everyone. They can, because they generally give you a ground that we can seize your goods, even those goods. So here there are judgments where there are judicial pronouncements which has said that they cannot, because if everything is on record and everything is correct, then they cannot to recover any possible tax evasion which they believe have. In order to come, so they should document that why that goods has been seized. That should be taken on record for them, because that goods will be mentioned in the Panchnama, that why they have seized that goods. What is the linkage of seizure with respect to the such level of goods? And now the aspect which we want to discuss is, if they have seized such goods, that what recourse which is available to release such goods. So generally, the goods can be released within 30 days after the issuance of show cause notice. But it takes time from the level of adjudication, from the Panchnama to final adjudicating. आज के टाइम पे आपको अगर जिस टाइम पे पंचनामा दिया जाता है और शो कॉज नोटिस में बहुत there is ample time with the officers. So तब तक अगर officer लेके बैठेगा तो then it will becomes a loss to the assessee. So there is a provision that you can release the goods on bond or furnishing a security on a payment of tax interest which is of security amount. In seizure and search and seizure proceedings, goods are liable for confiscation, and according to section 130, the following goods are liable for confiscation if supply is made. So it has been mentioned that in search and seizure proceeding, goods are liable for confiscation can only be seized. Confiscation, so जो goods का हम confiscation कर सकते हैं, उन्हीं को हम seize कर सकते हैं. According to section 130 of the CGST Act, the following goods are liable for confiscation if the supply is made in contravention of provision of GST law, if the goods are not accounted, if the goods are not liable to be taxed as supplied without applying for registration. So you are selling the goods of above the threshold limit without even applying for registration, or you have actually not documented in your records, or something which is you have contravened any provisions of the law in terms of wherein with the intention to evade the payment of the tax. If during search and seizure proceedings the taxpayer does not have any goods, then they cannot seize anything or to recover the tax liability. So that here my point which I want to highlight is that aapko officers, there is a possible way that officer even after this Panchnama will say that we will come and seize your goods to recover the possible tax evasion. So here my point to you is that they cannot do it because they have to invoke the powers of section 83, which talks about attachment of any property including bank account. And there are judicial pronouncements and settled judicial pronouncements wherein it has been said that in order to attach it, there should be a reason with the officer that the person will gone away, that the person, if the assessee is a genuine assessee, or even if otherwise, if the assessee is operating in the premises, there is no possible case wherein he can run away, or the assessee is doing their business of premises in their own factory, then there are grounds which we can justify that how the attachment is to be happened, because it is something, if the goods are being attached, then their running operation, then the labor will lose their job. All these things can be a ground to establish before the court, so that the attachment which has been done can be done away. Then what is the meaning of summon proceedings? So what is generally the one of the aspect which for the assessees, because the assessees जब ये एक proceeding से गुजरते हैं, तो इस time पे there is so much of pressure from the authorities to come and give us the statement, to come even after the odd hours. They even say you to come from the perspective of and pay the taxes. So, and even they can ask you that I do not want your consultant to appear before me, and I want only the person from your company, or from your CFO, or from your tax head, or a promoter, any person which has a power to give us any statement, as well as they can have a power to pay the taxes if we require to pay. So that is one point which I would like to apprise, is that summon statement are generally a statement wherein any information is being asked to confirm or give in relation to any proceedings. So with respect to that, it has been categorically covered that even that summon can be done through the authorized representative, or produce any books of accounts to produce. However, if any personal oath statement is required to the officer, then the authorized representative cannot appear in such circumstances. So what is important to highlight here is that you need to see that consultant, CAs, lawyer, everyone can appear and represent the client. And if the officer is saying that I cannot, then you can show, and you can even, there is a section that any person, section 70, gives you an authorized representative of power, and you have a legal power of attorney or a wakalatnama in your hand to represent your clients. Then which department, we have already discussed in the past that the DGGI authorities, which is an intelligence team, a law enforcement agency under the Ministry of Finance, is responsible for tax fighting evasion cases. So they are the person, they will, rather than your general jurisdiction officers, that is a separate wing of the GST, and this is a separate wing. Earlier it was the common name was the anti-evasion team, which you are used to be called under the service tax arena. What are the practical difficulties which are being faced by the taxpayers during the summon and after search and seizure? So department will ask you to pay the possible tax evasion with interest and penalty, and they will say you that you should pay the tax, interest, and even the penalty of 15% of the amount. We'll discuss why they always say of 15% of the amount, what all the things. So the authorities generally request to make the payment in cash instead of utilization of credit. Although there is a power that you can utilize your credit and pay your DRC3, but the officer generally asks, they say you to seizure of the goods, we'll seize your goods, we'll close your factory, we'll attach your bank account, we'll arrest you even. So what all things they can ask, and what all powers the assessee has. The first aspect which we have covered is they cannot seize goods which are other than, which has nothing to do in terms of the contravention, and they can only seize goods which are in respect of contravention, and section 130 are the cases which deal such which goods they can seize. Apart from that, they cannot seize. With regard to the closure, they can seal, whether that they can seal the premises. It is very important to understand that to seal any premises, there has to be non-compliance, nothing that has to be justified. So you need to make sure that these are the cases wherein if the officers, then you need to see whether they can actually do, or they are just saying for the purpose of making a pressure to the assessees. So a valid ground should be there in respect of that. Attachment of bank account. So in the GST arena, there are so many high court rulings which has said wherein the officer has made a bank attachment, and in a way of writ matters, the department, wherein the department invoked the attachment of bank account, it has been held that the officers cannot do that till the time the assessee is cooperating, till the time assessee is a assessee which is doing the business operations. That's not possible that assessee to go away or to actually run away from anywhere and hide himself after this proceeding. So that is something which you need to justify in terms of whether a consultant. We have already discussed that a consultant can appear in any of the proceedings. It is only when a personal oath statement, then the officer require the personal intervention of the person whose, and in section 70 summons statement, any person can be called which the department feel can be called in respect to that. Even that can be the CA who was filing the return. So you have to make sure in your return filings when you are assisting your assessees, then you have a legal documentation and what are the scope limitations which you have agreed with your client, that is fully available with you, so that anything which comes into such level of cases, you have a foundation that what all document based on which your returns were filed. Then under section 70, whether the officer can request the other information, yes. So आपको अगर आपकी proceedings के बाद क्या ऑफिसर कोई और information भी मांग सकता है या वही information मांगेगा, that is one of the question which is being asked. So the officer can ask you any questions which has linkage with that reason to believe, whether the other aspects which are required, ITC, return filed, explanation regarding genuineness of the transaction. Then now this is one of the important aspect for the professional to understand that how they need to reply to such level of proceedings when they will issue you a summons statement asking certain information, or because in the summons statement they are not alleging anything. So they are not alleging that you have done anything malified. So they will always say you give out information with regard to that transaction and give us the robust documentation to justify that transaction. They will not allege you, they will not use the words that this you have done incorrectly and give us the documentation. So even in respect to that reply, you do not have to use the word it has been alleged, and that is a very important aspect which you need to see while replying to any such letters. Second, give us maximum documentation in such level of cases. If you will give the maximum documentation, so that will make the other person or your case stronger, not at this level, but even at the level when this matter will goes to the show cause notice or the show cause notice is being prepared. Because in the show cause notice, if they will not account all the replies which we have given, and if they will give you a straightaway demand that why this demand, then we can have a grounds that it was not a speaking and the records on record documentation were not taken while concluding the show cause notice. So there should be on record documentation which the assessee or a professional should submit at the time any summon statement is being required. Summon is not only a summon statement which a statement is to be given, it even requires any document and information which is required by the officer after that summon proceeding. And you don't have to accept any allegation till the time you actually know. If you actually know that there are certain allegations which you feel that on a peace of mind you want to deposit, then you need to tell them that it is something which on the peace of mind and why that has been missed. Because it is very important that one ground can even make your entire case a negative case. So it is very, very important that what all aspects the legal letter which you are submitting is very important rather than a general reply which anyone can submit while replying to the authorities. And you need to use, if you are submitting anything on a peace of mind, you need to use such level of word that on a peace of mind we are posting. Although without prejudice to our submission of accepting the default, we are just submitting it under the peace of mind to make the payment. Then while making the payment, which option? So now this is one of the, again, a widely asked question by the professionals as well as by the assessees, if they or in terms of the CFO or tax head, that which head we should use to make the payment. Because what happens is there is a provision under GST law, section 73 and section 74. Section 73, it talks about the cases wherein there are not a fraudulently cases, and section 74 talks about all those level of proceedings, adjudication, wherein there is a case of fraud and the department has come up with certain level of fraud of the assessee, and they have issued a notice and asked, or the show cause notice, that why we should not levy penalty, why we should not levy demand and interest under section 74 if it is a cause of fraud. And if it is not a case of fraud, other than fraud is something which is of a non-compliance which has been effort, then they see it under section 73 that why we should not levy tax, interest and penalty which is being specified. So under both the sections, the penalties are different. The penalties if can be deposited. So if let's suppose there is a case, the officer has issued a show cause notice, and they will generally issue in such level of cases, they say that under section 74 why the penalty should not be levied. So government has given a relaxation. Agar if someone before issuing any show cause notice accepts any demand, and in such scenario if that demand he is accepting, he is of the view that that demand is not of fraud, it is something which is of the peace of mind, anything related to that, then they can deposit the tax and interest without any penalty. And if they feel that yes, we have done actually a default and that was a fraud case, then the government gives you a relaxation that you only need to deposit 15% of the tax amount as a penalty, so that the officer after this payment will give you a clearance letter and will say that clearance letter will establish that he will not issue a show cause notice in respect of that transaction against which you have paid the tax, interest and 15% of the penalty amount. So if for all those cases you accept and you see that it is a fraud case, then you need to deposit under DRC 03 the amount under section 74(5), and that 74(5) is with tax, interest and penalty of 15%. If you feel that it is not a case of tax and interest, fraud, then you can deposit under section 73 subclause 5, which is a case which is other than fraud. Now the aspect which comes to your mind is whether we can deposit that tax amount via input tax credit. So till the time you have that input tax which you have not used, and the fraud is in respect of that inputs, and the inputs is continuously consistently available, then we suggest that you should use that input tax credit. Although the officer will not say that to pay, they will always be happy if you will pay by cash. So you need to make sure that whatever you are paying, whether you can pay by credit or cash, it is based upon the facts of the case. But it is not that you cannot use a credit, because even the GST system is allowing you to pay by a credit. Next question which comes to your mind is, if we are genuine and we do not even accept under section 73, we do not even accept under section 74, can we pay under protest? Because under protest was a term which was widely used under the pre-GST arena, specifically wherein the department was saying that to tax and we were saying not to tax, and in order to just see the department case and to cooperate with the authorities, the assessee generally asked to pay the tax amount. So in such scenario, under protest is still can be done, because it is nothing comes from the GST law, it comes from your natural right, which gives you a power to pay anything, not to accept and pay under protest, and that power is an independent power, and that nothing has to be done with respect to the GST law. So if the officer will say that there is no provision under the GST law which was earlier there under the excise provisions, then you have a legal ground that it is not something which is coming from the GST law. It is a common natural justice which are available as per the constitutional right of a person. It is a fundamental right. And then the important aspect, if we want to pay under protest, do we have to pay via return, normal return, or can we pay via DRC 03? And if we will pay via DRC 03, then what is that option? So the answer to this is that DRC 03 also contains payment option of others. So in the others, you can mention that ground, that what all aspects, if you have paid under protest, then mention in detail of the summary. There is a column wherein you can mention that on what points you are making a payment. So you should mention it very carefully that it is something. And apart from that payment, if you want to make your payment via your normal return, then you can do so. However, authority will not acknowledge that. In such scenario, you can deposit a letter that you have made the payment under protest in your normal return. But this is something which you need to see to your consultant very carefully while making such payments. And how to make payments, we have already discussed. What is the difference between section 73 and 74? We have said that under section 73, before issuance of show cause notice, if you accept anything which is other than fraud and you believe that the tax should be paid, in such scenario you can pay without any penalty, and the penalty should not be there, and even the department will close the matter. But if you feel that it is a case of section 74 and the officer will justify that, in such scenario you need to pay 15% of the tax. And after show cause notice, within 30 days, if you still feel, then that 15% goes to 25%. So, and after 30 days of the issuance or notice or after issuance, then these amounts goes on increasing. That is something which you need to see very carefully. Now, the important aspect which the assessees always discusses, and as well as they always, I'll say, they always try to see with their consultant, as well as they have a dilemma that whether the officer can arrest or not. So what is when they can arrest? We'll discuss that aspect. First of all, I would like to apprise that arrest provisions are very much under the GST law because of the circular trading activities, and even in such cases, it sometimes might happen that a power which is being given to the GST officer, they can take the undue advantage of that. So you need to see very carefully whether the arrest has been done with a specific facts, and if that facts are available, you should see very carefully with your consultant and the legal team. So whenever such level of cases comes to our point, then we discuss in with our court team as well, and then jointly we make a decision whether we have to represent such cases and how we can have to represent such cases. The first aspect which we always see, whether the commissioner has the power. So the commissioner is vested with the power to arrest. Now the question comes in कि sir उन्होंने आज ये reason to believe के basis पे ये सोच लिया हमने गलत किया. Yes, we have done incorrect if they have believed. Now, till the time the final order does not passes, can they arrest on the reason to believe? So now the aspect which I would like to apprise, yes, they have the power to arrest, and that power is being given under the law, under section 69, which gives the power to arrest even if they have certain level of cases, and these level of cases are wherein the assessees supply goods without issuance of invoice, wherein issuance of bill without supply of goods. So दोनों ही केस हो गए. क्या उन्होंने goods और services दे दी without issuance of supply, और goods के केस में genuine ज्यादा होता है because service के केस में पता ही नहीं लग सकता. Second point is the issuance of bill without supply of goods. They are supplying the goods without actually supplying the invoices, or someone has availed. So it is now on the recipient side. It was the first two clauses are from the supplier side. The now next two clauses is something they have availed ITC without actually receiving the supply. So, and then someone collects and they fail to pay and evade the taxes. That is something. So if a non-registered person is collecting the taxes and they are not registered and they are not depositing, that is one of the grounds. So now the point is, officers can arrest taxpayers if the amount of tax evaded exceeds 2 crore rupees. Even that 2 crore is not concluded by way of order, the officer can arrest. So the section 69 gives the power to arrest. However, there is a monetary limit of the taxpayer commit subsequent offences. So in that scenario, now the point is above 2 crore they can arrest. And now you need to see if they will arrest, then what all aspects you need to see, if whether you have a power to take a bail. When you don't have a power to take a bail and the offense are non-cognizable. So the government has prescribed, the GST law has prescribed a monetary limit of 5 crore. If the tax amount is exceeding that 5 crore, then it is a non-bailable offense and a cognizable offense. That means if these 4 cases, A, B, C, D, are being done and wherein the amount of tax evaded is more than 5 crore, then in that scenario it is a case of non-billable and cognizable offense. And cognizable offense का मतलब ये होता है कि a serious category of offense in respect of which an officer has the authority to make an arrest without a warrant and start investigation with or without the permission of the court. And non-cognizable offense which are less than 5 crores and wherein the officer do not have the authority to make arrest without a warrant. So you need to see very carefully that what all aspects you need to see while doing such level of investigation, such level, and these are the critical matters. And it is my humble submission to all my professional friends and tax heads, as well as to the SACs, that you should take up such level of cases. You should not see that if you will not involve or your consultant will not be involved, then you can skip because you want to save something. It is very important, and you should hire a consultant at that point of time, because if the search can be concluded within the inspection proceedings without even going to the search, you are saving so much of proceedings, tax, litigations, and that is very, very important. So appointing a right time or timely is very important to all the persons who are either listening to me or will listen. Thank you, everyone. Now, I think if someone has a query, anyone has a query, then they can post, or I think the CA Club India can tell us that what is now. I am available to answer all the queries if someone has it. So one of the question which has come is whether it is mandatory to pay tax on the spot during search. So one important aspect which you need to see is payment of taxes are independent, and that has to be seen very carefully. If you will see that that tax amount is required to be paid without even going to the further, it is very much important that you should not pay any taxes in a hurry, and you should consult rightly before even doing such level of activities. Because payment is not important. Even if the case is, if you think that you are there is certain activity which is required to be paid, you should see very carefully that the payment should be done at the right time. Because if you will pay at this point of time, then the officer will ask you to pay further tax on some other transaction. So it is very important that payment of the tax should be done very carefully. So power to arrest is used by the officer. The power to arrest is something which is very, very different from. So you need to see that if the officer is summarizing such level of disputes wherein you feel that these are the frauds, these are the cases. The arrests are only in respect of those cases which we have discussed. And if you have a valid documentation, you have the transporter copy, you have the bill copy, you have the evidence that you have actually received those goods, and there is a GRN in your records, and you have every such level of documentation. And as well as section 16 talks about that you have received the goods, you have paid the supplier has paid, which is not in your hand, you don't have to see that. And e-way bills, e-way bill is something which you need to see. Let's suppose there is a case wherein the goods has been received, the e-way bill were not issued. So in such scenario, it is not a case wherein the genuineness has been challenged. It is only a contravention of law. It is not a case wherein the goods has been received without the invoice copy. You have a copy of invoice. You have a record that the goods were received. if the supplier who has issued the e-way bill, who was supposed to issue the e-way bill, has done incorrectly with the incorrect truck number, that is not the responsibility. However, it is always a suggested method while you are audit, while you are proceeding, that you need to see very carefully that e-way bills reconciliation are being done and a sample verification of e-way bill should be done. The next question which has been asked is, sir, can the officer arrest in any offense below 2 crore? So my aspect is there are only certain aspects which has been given. So section 69 has to be dealt in such scenario. Below 2 crores, the officer cannot arrest. That is first aspect. And only that 2 crore limit is computed based upon those 4 instances which we have discussed. It is not that the officer can arrest. In other cases, they can arrest once the matter is being concluded, even after a show cause notice, an order has been issued. And if you have obtained a stay even after that order. So till the time, I have not seen in the GST, because there is nowhere that order has been issued wherein the matter has been concluded from a show cause notice to final adjudication. So it is very much important that you should see that arrest is something which is a very peculiar, and the officer might use such level of word, but you need to see whether they can actually do, and that is why the role of the consultant comes in. If the officer forces to pay by DRC, so Mr. Sampath has asked one query. If the officer forces to pay by DRC 3, then after payment, can we consider that tax amount in GST 3B? So that is one aspect which I want to tell you, that if you are making any payment in DRC 03, so there is an automatic liability first comes in your books, and there is a liability against that liability you are making. So it's not that which were earlier being done when the e-way bill was being, when you were releasing certain goods and by making a payment of DRC, and then you were using, or instead of DRC, you are making a payment via normal challan and you are using in your returns. It is not a case. So in DRC 3, whenever you are making any payment, there is a one course of liability which occurs, and then against that liability you are making a payment. So it is automatic knockoff of those situations. I hope I am able to tell Mr. Sampath. Is it necessary to record the reason to believe in writing before issuing order for inspection? Yes, it is very, very important that a reason to believe should be there in the officer's record, and in today's time, the document, there is a DIN procedure, everything is documented, and it's not that they can do it on a backdated science. So that is very important. However, it is not important to disclose such reason to believe to the assessee, and that we have already discussed. Any other question? And thanks everyone for the good comments. In case still, if anyone wants any further discussion into it, we are happy to share our knowledge, and we have given our connect details. Over to you, CA Club India. So the last question which has come to is, how long will the books and document remain with the officer? So the law has given that they should be released within 3 months, and if that within 30 days after the issuance of show cause notice. However, if 6 months after the completing of the Panchnama, 6 months they will not, then you can ask, and that is the one of the power, but still even that 6 months can be extended. However, we should suggest in such level of cases when the officer are making an undue advantage of their powers, you should definitely approach a court high writ by a writ, because it is something they are going beyond that, and there is no remedy of filing an appeal in respect of such things. You should approach in such matters with a writ to the jurisdiction high courts. Thank you everyone, and we should suggest that everyone should take up such level of cases, because with the March and this lockdown, the officer are actually collating all information, and it is very high time. You need to see very carefully your clients whether there is any such level of activities which are not, and while doing your GST audits or any health check. So that's why we are suggesting to everyone during this lockdown period that take or do your health check studies for your clients which you are doing, or even ask to some of your more clients that you can do, and this becomes the next of the one of the revenue source for all the professional friends of ours. They can increase they can save the tax of the client by doing such level of GST health check. And I'm telling you that is very correct. that if they will do such level of activities, then you are saving their taxes as well as possible exposures which they may probably have in their books of account. Thank you, everyone.